We're going to now introduce you to our speaker. I'm happy to introduce to you Jeff Holt. Jeff, if you stand up, come on up to the podium as I read your bio. Jeff Holt is the Vice President of Healthcare Banking Consultant for PNC Bank. Please, if you join us up here. He's been with PNC Bank for 28 years. Over the past 8 years, he's been servicing only healthcare clients, specifically supporting the medical, dental, and veterinary practices. Jeff Holt manages the line of business from Orlando to Gainesville. By partnering with healthcare professionals, he's able to better explain and make recommendations on how to improve their revenue cycles and enhance specialized lending opportunities through healthcare banking services. He's earned his bachelor degree in business administration from the University of Michigan and is in the process of becoming a certified medical practice executive with the American College of Medical Practice Executives. Please give a warm welcome to Jeff Holt. Right. Now, Jeff's going to speak to us today on how embezzlement looks for medical practices, right? It's right there. It's right in the practices. There's been all kinds of statistics. We put them out on the website. MGMA said that 60% of the practices have been, currently are, or will be embezzled from, with the average loss being $150,000. Wow. Jeff, take it over.
So embezzlement in the practice, I've given this discussion probably about a couple dozen times now. I've come down from Michigan early this year, and the same interest is here as it was there, because it's the same issue here as it was there. So pretty staggering information. So if you could advance a couple of slides. Go, okay. So this is kind of the information that we're going to go over. You already heard my bio. Embezzlement statistics is pretty impressive and frightening at the same time. Characteristics of embezzlers. A recent example in the news. That's a pretty good one, unfortunately. Financial indicators to look for. Okay, a lot of practices don't realize what to look for in many cases, unfortunately. Some examples of how it's done, what to do and what not to do if you suspect it. And not to do is the big one there. Some best practices to put in place, and then external fraud measures to consider. So the statistics, again, pretty frightening. Embezzlement strikes almost 60% of healthcare practices, 60%. So typically when I give this presentation, it's to a group of dentists, physicians, or veterinarians, I say, okay, look to the left of you, look to the right of you. Chances are about 2 to 3 of you are, have been, are, or will be embezzled from, but I'm sure it's not you, right? And that kind of grabs their attention, because that's reality, unfortunately. That's reality. So medical and dental practices lose about $25 billion annually. That's pretty staggering, right? Median loss, as small businesses, 100 employees or less, was 150,000. Now, I want to say on that number, that's only of what was reported. In a lot of cases, they stop going back because why? In many cases, if they know they're not getting the money back, why pay extra money to find more losses and hurt and kind of drive the knife deeper, right? So they stop. So I believe this number is low compared to reality. And I believe that 60% is low compared to reality. Again, there's a lot not reported because people do not want to get their patients concerned on what happened, if you think about it. Okay? Estimates are each organization loses about 5% of the revenue to fraud each year. There's a different ways that it happens. It's not just to say somebody is taking cash. There's over 1,000 ways that is committed to a practice and growing, okay, as things change with how a practice runs. Okay, small organizations are disproportionately victimized by occupational fraud, so primarily because they don't have controls into place. Okay, they don't realize what they should be doing and what they're not doing. They don't know what they don't know, as we all realize that. And here's an interesting number. More than 85% of fraudsters have never been previously charged or convicted of fraud-related offense, either because no one prosecuted them, which happens a lot. Again, because they don't want to publicize what happened. The practice doesn't. Or that just a life event that causes them to change. Okay, we'll go into more into that. Here's some industry statistics by case numbers. So if you look at the top people as far as or industries of fraud related cases, you can see that healthcare is right here. Okay, healthcare is number 5. This is why I know a lot about it, because banking is number 1. Okay, so I've actually managed a couple different branches for in banking, and actually did work in the fraud area. You label it as a fraud area of the banking for some time. So you can see banking is an easy target, but healthcare is 5th for number of cases. Okay, now on this side, it's down a ways, but at least it's not up here. We're mining where people are stealing gold and diamonds and precious metals here, but at least it gives you an idea to say with all the industries, where is healthcare ranked? How bad is it compared to the other industries? So you can see that as far as number of cases, it's up there. Okay. Okay. Characteristics of embezzlers. Okay. So what are they? Which is important to know. What is it that you need to recognize, or a practice needs to recognize? Okay. So long-time employee is typical, because they need to be there for a while to understand the operations of the practice and where the weak points of the practices are, as far as to say audit measures aren't in place. Okay, so you have to think about that. They need to understand the systems and how to get around the systems. Has a full trust of the doctor and is a devoted employee. Obviously, you got to build trust so that you can get the opportunity to have responsibilities that are given to you in order to embezzle from the practice, right? And again, a lot of cases, it's not to say that they are hired and that they're specifically looking to do this. In most cases, life events change, and life events change people, right? What characteristics should alert you? Okay, the person never takes a vacation, because what happens? They go on a vacation, what happens? Somebody's got to take over their job, right? And then that's typically when things are found. They're very protective of their job. Again, they want to conceal things that they're doing, so they got to protect the processes that they have in place. Hours of overtime, often alone, because that's when they get their best work done, right? Before or after hours. Okay. They don't want to cross-train, because they've got it down, of how they need to do things, so it's not recognized. The doctor often depends on the person in the office. This office for emergencies, usually living beyond their means, and lifestyle and behavioral changes. So think about these things and how much this makes sense to say the person that might be embezzling from the practice. And again, embezzling is just not cash, right? That's there's so many different ways. Okay, so to go into the numbers, and again, not just looking at cash, but in the values of things that they might take. Could be inventory, equipment, okay, stealing hours, right, and of course cash. But as everyone assumes, that's the only way. But so looking at the age of the perpetrator, okay, you can notice the bar is pretty high in this area. Think of a life events going on at this age in any of our times, okay? Maybe divorce, maybe kids, teenagers, maybe midlife crisis. That happens sometimes, right? So that's why I say life events happen and change people. Okay? So addictions is another area as well. All right, so here's another, as far as to say the average age of the person versus what they have found to embezzle. Okay, as you notice that, obviously, if they're in the practice longer and they've been doing it for some time, the number should be higher, which this chart definitely reflects that. Okay, so and then these numbers obviously, as far as somebody did pay the extra money to go back and find how much that person has embezzled over several years. Here's an unfortunate recent example in the Orlando area. She had controls over basically everything in the practice, and she opened up an account somewhere else and just diverted funds into that account at a different bank. Okay? So she lived beyond her means. She had an extravagant lifestyle. No one recognized that from the practice. She left the practice, and then that's when they started finding things. Okay, $650,000. The funny thing is she was going to be a consultant after leaving this practice and making claims of what she's able to do for practices. So I just, it's nice in Florida. You can put somebody's name in and get mug shots right away in Florida. So I thought that was pretty cool. But unfortunately, it's a real life event. It's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate. But in this case, the things that were missed is there was no fraud controls in place. She was given too much authority without being responsible for the things that she was responsible for. Okay, no one was auditing her or checking on her, and no one recognized her extravagant lifestyle, because if she's buying all these things that she's has purchased, that there's indicators there, and no one added those together to say, hey, we know you don't make that much. We know what your spouse does, and this doesn't add up. Okay. Go ahead. All right. Financial indicators of embezzlement. These are easy things to look for. Just easy. Large or unusual adjustments on the bank reconciliation. Low collection percentages. Discrepancies between bank deposits and postings. That's an easy one. Especially to say, gee, why is there no cash in our deposits? Why is cash not showing up? But a lot of times, practices just don't check that. There's no one checking that. Abnormal number of expense report items. So saying that, hey, I spent this on this related work item or related work expense. I need to be reimbursed. Okay? So a lot of cases where they're taking their word for it and just reimbursing the employee. No cash deposits. Large amounts of overtime pay or payroll costs are increasing. That's a big one. Overtime pay and payroll costs are increasing. So think of how many practices that you might be aware of that, what measures do they have in place to monitor the actual hours that their staff that they're working. Do they have a time clock? That's easy, right? So today's technology, it's easy to have whether it be a thumbprint, a card that you scan, or a card to punch, and then it electronically monitors it. It wirelessly can go right to the computer and punch everybody in and out. That way, it's more difficult to have somebody steal hours. That's the same thing as embezzling. It's the same thing. Okay, and increase in patient refunds. Now think about that one. That's an easy way. Right. So, writing checks, refunding patients. And how many of the physicians in the practice you think really monitor that to say that it truly should be refunded back to the patient? Or even on the credit card terminal. Reverses on that, okay? That's easy. Put a management code that's needed to refund a patient's credit card. That's an easy fix. Examples of how it can be happen. Cash payments never making it to the bank. Embezzler may reduce the charge amount in the patient's record, but charge the accurate amount if the patient pays cash. Post charges, but keep the payment. Balance sits in the AR and is eventually written off. So write-offs. And these are questions I ask the practices that I consult in when I go through the revenue cycle. And say, okay, let's understand these things that you're doing. Let's understand processes. And when I ask a doctor, how much did you write off last year? I don't know. Okay, once we find the number, okay, Any idea where these numbers, where this number came from, or is this a typical number? I don't know. You don't know? Refunds written to fictitious patients. Do you think they're even checking that to say this is for this patient, have the actual chart there? Employee payroll checks for hours not worked. That would go with to say ghost employees. You know, somebody said, oh, my son helped out and do this task. Or my husband came in and worked on your computers. I've heard that one. So that's, and again, this goes to show you it's not just cash that's brought in by patients. Practices account being used for bills that are not legitimate expenses of the practice. Checks made payable to the practice being endorsed and cashed by employees, with the charges either never being entered into the practice management system or being adjusted off. Checks made payable to the practice being deposited into a bank account that doesn't belong to the practice, such as the example that we showed you. That's happened a lot. So you have, I'm not saying things against other banks, I'm just saying banks in general. There's banks that safeguard you by making sure when an account's open, it's being opened by the right people for the right reasons. And there's banks that don't. The banks that don't are the ones that the embezzlers are looking for and open their accounts at. Okay? And that's becoming the easiest way for embezzlers to steal from practices anymore. Okay? What to do if you suspect embezzlement? Don't announce it to everybody. So I mean, that's the first two. So stealth, okay? Consult with your banker, CPA, and or attorney who should be experienced in dealing with these matters. Because they, therefore, you don't want to call the police. You want to make sure to call your consultants that you deal with and make sure what they advise you to do before you call the police. Preserve, if you have evidence, you wouldn't. You're not a practice in most cases. Some of you are. But you'd want to make sure if you have evidence to preserve it, because that way it doesn't just sprout legs and walk away because somebody suspects that you suspect, and obviously they're going to cover their tracks, right? And in some cases, practices have been burnt down to cover their tracks, and even to say somebody hired their boyfriend to kill the dentist in one of the cases I know about to cover their tracks. So another reason why not to announce it, that I think you're stealing from me and I'm going to prosecute you. Okay. So those are some real life examples, right? And again, you've got to remember the mindset of the people you're working with, that is the embezzler, is things are changed in their lives typically, okay? People aren't born embezzlers. You have to look at them as an addict, okay? They have, their addiction is getting money, something valuable from the practice and getting away with it. Because maybe, again, it could be gambling, it could be a drug addiction, it could be a family member's issue, such as, I have a son who's addicted to drugs, I don't want him stealing, so I'll steal for him. That's a real life example. Okay? All right? What not to do. Do not call the police right away or insurance companies. Do not confront the suspect for reasons I gave examples of. Do not place bait. Because a lot of times, all of a sudden, somebody sees $500 sitting in a drawer that typically is not there in the last 3 years, then that may get them concerned that, hey, they're trying to catch me. All right? And they cover their tracks. Do not change financial protocols. Do not fire anyone, and upgrade software systems if possible. That's an easy one. Okay. So, a question I like to ask the practices that I deal with is say, what do you do to protect the practice from embezzlement? All right. And typically the response I get is pretty minimal. of things that they're doing. Well, we lock the drawer with cash. Okay? That's it, right? Well, again, the mindset is it's cash, right? So here's I'm going to give you some great measures that you can relate to the clients that you deal with, or if you work at a practice, make sure to look to implement. Financial statements. Have them mailed to the physician's home, P.O. Box, and/or CPA. Utilize statements online instead of paper, right? Because the thing is you don't want the information of, this is my account, this is what's going through it, here's the balances I keep, and then also somebody couldn't Photoshop the statements, cut and paste of things that maybe they've withdrawn out of the account, and say, here's the statements that you need that after I've Photoshopped them, and here's what you should give to your CPA too to reconcile, right? And again, this is real life stuff. So if it's sent to the home of the physician owner or the CPA, it cuts that out. Or even to say online statements, electronic statements, there's no photoshopping those, obviously, right? Okay, patient credit cards. This is a big one, a huge one. There's huge HIPAA and MasterCard Visa liability, as well as, say, financial legal liability. Okay, have security codes installed on merchant terminals for refunds. Okay, I touched on that. Do not write down a patient's credit card information anywhere. That is an issue, and that is being done a lot. Think about it. Do you want your credit card information written down somewhere where somebody can have access to it? Per case, up to $100,000 if the practice is found at fault for getting the information to somebody who commits the fraud. Okay? Plus, it's a HIPAA violation as well. All right? Patient's financial information. Keep a patient's credit card information securely electronically stored, whereas off-site employees can only see the last digits of the credit card number. So as an embezzler in a practice, this is easy. This is an easy way. I'm not stealing from the practice, but eventually the practice becomes liable, so it's a risk to the practice. But just to give examples, I have found practices that I asked them, tell me the process of getting, and here's a couple examples, of getting patients' credit card or patients' payments through credit cards. One says, well, we send out an invoice and we ask them to write down the credit card information if they want to pay that way and mail it back to us. Okay. So tell me about the mail. How do you receive it? Where's your mailbox? And who gets it? And how does a mail move from point A to point B, being point B being the person that secures that information? Well, the mailbox is on the road. Okay, where anybody can get at it, right? Then whoever has time goes out and gets it, sets it on the desk. Sets it on the desk. Patients walk by the desk, okay? Then we get it to the person that processes after they open the mail. And then we take that and we process the payments, and then we bundle it up and we put it in this unlocked cabinet. Okay. So you're telling me at no point is it secure and it's open to anybody who wants to pick it up and view it and take the information. One example. Another example is, tell me about your patient payment programs. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, we make it real simple. We have this book that we write down the credit card information in, but I got it somewhere where no one think to look for it. And in the book, we have post-dated checks too. So they can either post-date their checks for their payments, or we can just write down the credit card information and process it. Now, in their mind, it makes sense. They don't know what they don't know. They don't realize that they'll never be able to process MasterCard Visa anymore. They're going to get charged. Think about somebody stealing that book. That practice is out of business. Okay? Okay, let's move on. Engage your CPA consultant to do a periodic audits. The key here is random. This never happens. I say never. A lot of cases does not happen. Because then in the owner's mind is, hey, that cost me money. That cost me money to do, right? Well, guess what? Guess what? It's going to cost you on average $150,000 if it does happen. Compare the receipts per day sheet to the bank deposit receipt. That's easy. If you don't have a day sheet, get one. Meaning that, who was seen today? Who paid what today of that? What was charged out today? Balance it out. Okay? All right. Move on. Hiring practice. Okay? Another area. Hiring, right? Okay? Background checks, right? So, again, it goes back to, well, that costs money. Oh, so use this, in the hiring in the HR area, say, use this information I'm giving you to say, guess what? You don't pay for the background checks now, you'll pay. And you don't want to pay the way that you may have to pay, okay? Bond employees, there's insurance and bonding. I have an insurance agent usually that speaks with me on this topic. But there is cheap insurance and bonding that you can get on your employees to safeguard the practice. Direct all checks coming via the mail to a bank lockbox is a good option. Again, you have to weigh the cost on that to say what might make more sense, or it could go directly to the medical biller if they're open to receiving the checks. That's another option. Insist that all transactions be documented. Get rid of signature stamps. I usually have everybody, raise your hand if you utilize a signature stamp, and usually I get 2 to 3 people in the crowd that do. And I said, well, it's time to destroy those. Because guess what? You're giving somebody the authority to stamp anything with your signature on it, including a check for $100,000, $10,000, whatever, right? And then they're gone. Employees, segregate duties, cross-train employees. Everyone takes a vacation, mandatory. I don't know about you, but where I work, vacation is mandatory. You do not do business while you're on vacation because of this. And you recognize the bank was #1 in reported cases for embezzlement, right? Okay. All right. No one at the practice is alone. Again, that's when they do their best work. Time clock. All punch in and out. Make sure checks are stamped immediately for deposit only so that they don't get diverted to a special account, right? Go next. Periodically review accounting entries rather than just checking totals. Compare schedule and sign-in sheet to the day sheet every day. No show versus really who did show up. Okay. At the end of the month, compare total deposits at the bank statements to total receipts. Compare charges, receipts, and adjustments to prior periods. So it'd be good to have the benchmarking and comparison from one month to the next. Calculate collection percentages, compare to the prior periods. Inventory controls. Now here's a big one. This is like almost non-existing. Now there are a lot of practices that really they don't have much inventory. There's not, but you think of those that do have inventory, okay? Whether it be a dental practice or a practice that has maybe injections that they give that the medicine is pretty costly, or just equipment, inventory of the equipment, computers. I had one physician say, I just noticed this year that I don't know where a couple pieces of equipment went, but my staff is so good, I hate to accuse them and make them want to quit and leave. I'm thinking, what? So, inventory controls. Even keeping a fake camera in the inventory room. Just they don't have to know it doesn't work. If it's just there, they see it. And have a log for inventory in, inventory out, and then somebody to audit it. That's easy. Rarely is done. Healthcare IT security. Hire to keep computers secure from outside and inside. That's becoming a greater issue as we move on, because it's easier for fraudsters or embezzlers to do it electronically than to do it any other way as technology, it moves on, but yet the security is not there that should be there. Like changing dates on computers. And some of the practice management software doesn't change to recognize that you changed the date. No, nothing is alerted. Not all cases, but in some cases that they can do that. Okay. Cash controls. This is the easy one. Again, not done a lot. Dual control. Audit them. Lock it up. Those are the simple things, but yet I have yet to see a practice that does all the things that they should do. External fraud protection options. Okay, so I'm going to touch a little bit about outside of the practice. What do we have to worry about? We talked about internal fraud is embezzlement. External, okay? How do we protect your practice against outside fraud? Minimize your check writing. Check writing is 85% of the problem for external fraud. Think about when you write a check, what happens? What's on a check? Everything, your signature, your account number, where you bank, your information. Perfect, right? Okay. So they can take that, they can make up their own checks. And that's why it's 85%, because of how easy this is. They can whitewash certain parts of the check, keep your signature there, change the information however they want, or they can just take the check and have their own checks printed. And it's going to hit you hard one time, get all they can, and be done. Okay. So that's why when I talk to a practice, I'm looking at how many checks they're writing, how are the checks, where are the checks sent, how are they doing payroll, because payroll is a big area for that. Okay. So I say mandate direct deposit for staff. That way, because payroll is one of the biggest areas as far as where the checks are utilized as far as from fraudsters. Okay, 5% of credits have a risk of factor for fraud. So look at 5% versus 85%. I think I'd go with the 5%, right? Okay. Pay vendors electronically or with a company credit card. Online bill pay, that's easy, right? Or credit card. I mean, how many of us have reward cards? Think about that. It's better to have the air miles or points or cash back. Purchase all supplies with company credit card. So again, 20% corporate credit cards have a risk factor for fraud. Again, we're comparing to say 85 to 5 to 20%. Okay, and then we know, typically with MasterCard Visa, there's fraud and fraud protection involved. Okay, here there isn't. Okay, separate general and payroll checking accounts, which it's smart because of payroll being kind of the #1 area where checks are fraudulently done. Reconcile receivables every day. The problem is we get clients that say, I just balanced my account from a couple months ago. I seen that somebody, something's wrong with my account. Okay, a couple months. Okay, the trail gets a little cold after after a couple weeks, but auditing the account daily preferably, but weekly at a minimum, I would say. Protection options. And most banks should be able to offer these type of services. Okay. Traditional fraud tools. Positive pay, there's various forms of that. It just verifies to say, hey, these are the checks that I wrote for these amounts, and as they come in, it's confirmed. They match up. So that way you're notified right away. ACH positive pay, same thing. These are the debits that should be coming through electronically, and as they do, it matches up. UPIC, something very little, not well known at all, and it's easy. UPIC is a universal account number, so no matter what bank you go to, you can keep that account number. And what it allows is you give that UPIC account number to someone who's going to be electronically depositing to your account, and they only can deposit. They cannot debit with that number. It will not allow them. Okay? But so what's nice again is that you can use that UPIC number no matter if you change your bank account from bank to bank, it still can tie into the UPIC number. So if you think about this as a medical practice to say, I don't want to change banks because I don't want to have to give Blue Cross Blue Shield, Medicare, you know, this is my new bank, this is my new account number, because you know they're going to hold up payments, there's going to be red flags, and you know they're not nice people to deal with, right? And we don't want to impact cash flow. Well, with UPIC, if they, you know, if you have one started out for a practice, that's no worries, because as long as they keep the UPIC number, now they can never debit the account if they do that, but usually they'll adjust your, you know, what you receive. But you know that way, yeah, changing banks is not an issue. There's not an impact to the account and your revenue. And the other thing is that if there's embezzlement on the account or fraud on the account is locked down. Okay. Now think about it. If the account's locked down and somebody tries to deposit to your account and it bounces back to them, what do you think they're going to do as an insurance payer? You know? Red flag, right? Big red flags. So with UPIC, you know, easily if fraud happens to the account, it gets locked down for good reasons. The bank is doing doing the practice a favor, and that doesn't have to be your practice. It could be your business. Then easily open up another account, link it to the UPIC number, and they don't even realize anything. Okay. All right. Non-traditional fraud tools. ACH services, lockbox services. I don't know how many are familiar with that, where checks are sent into a bank's lockbox location, whether it be that bank or the bank that they utilize the services from. Information reporting, you know, electronically, you know, getting the information online. Payables, remote deposit. These are all banking services that are out there to make things electronic, more efficient, and safe. Here's an example of one of the firms I work with. They are the largest dental embezzlement firm in the world, Prosperident, but they do a fantastic job. I just want to give this an example because this is a embezzlement risk questionnaire, risk assessment questionnaire that they utilize, and I thought was really awesome. You can go to their website and see it, but what's nice about it is it doesn't matter if it's dental, it doesn't matter if it's medical or veterinary, it doesn't matter. This is more about trying to undercover the personalities and the traits of your employees to say, should there be concerns with you? And it's a point system. So, you know, they would go through, they would answer the questions to recognize, do I need to be concerned? Is there something there, you know, with what's going on with my staff that, you know, I need to have somebody to investigate, okay? This will give them, and I'm not saying these are the people to go to. I'm using it as an example, okay? So just so you have. And here's something saying that I am I'm somebody who's aware of these type of unfortunate circumstances, and I realize best practices, but I am not a certified fraud examiner, and I'm not a CPA, okay? I'm not an attorney, all right? But I always say that I did sleep at a Holiday Inn last night, all right? So, but, so just legally, I got to put that up there, all right? But, and that's it. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Who'd like to pose the first question to Jeff this morning? Seeing nobody, I'm going to ask you, Jeff. A company recently, I'll get to you in a moment, recently hired a new cleaning company. And the people come in, and they did a great job cleaning up the place. The next day, the office administrator says, oh, we've got to get some more checks. We're running low.
In their locked drawer where they were locked up, of course, right?
Yeah, actually, for some reason, she had to leave early that day and left the checks out on her desk. So what do you think happened? How many checks did she have to order?
Well, for the new account, she probably had to open probably 500 or so checks, I would think.
Yeah, that's exactly what had to happen. So guess what? If you hire a new cleaning crew or employees, You've got to check to make sure they don't have felonies, right, because they're maybe more likely to do this kind of fraud. But bottom line is they left the top checks, a book of 25. They took the lower 75 checks, used them all within a week, and the doctor ran out of money for some particular reason. Yeah. How often does that happen?
Unfortunately, it happens a lot, and I can say, and again, it seems like I can carry over what a bank does, what PNC Bank does as far as safeguards to what a practice should be doing, because I know if the bank is doing it for good reason, again, we are at the top of the list, that everything is locked up, everything is secure. If the employee, and somebody at the end of the day is responsible for going around and checking all drawers, if it's an office that the cleaning crew should not be going into, that it's locked, but everything is secure, that there's nothing out, nothing on the printer, nothing in the trash cans. I mean, think of those things. Confidential information in the trash cans or on the printer, okay, or on the fax machine. Pull the trays out of the fax machines so that things aren't happening, because things can be confidential, be sent over. So and that goes a lot to the cleaning crew.
Thank you. Dan, you had a question.
Yeah, I just had a question. When patients pay by credit card and put their information in, can that also be sent to a lockbox, or are there arrangements for other people to take care of that?
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, that can happen, but recommendably, I would. There's ways to do it. So there's technology through merchant services, and that if we have a merchant service, reputable company that deals with that too, they can know that you can store swipes. So if it's a common client or patient, they can store the swipe, as long as they get the authorization from the patient or client, then you can process it with the swipe stored. Or better yet, to say, hey, we've got our website that has a secure portal to put in your information there. And it's better to do that, to have a secure portal on a web page, or store the swipe, or do both, to do the processing that way. I highly recommend that, because credit card information, sending it out in mail in general, is just not something I feel comfortable. No matter if the point B from point A is secure, it's just that the fact that it has to go through the mail. Okay?
One moment.
No.
We've got a question over here.
On many practices now are doing automatic deposits they're scanning their checks, and I've heard from other people, as well as our practice has been told, to hang on to the checks after they've been swiped.
Correct.
And so now we have checks. We can't stamp the back. We can't put void on the front of the check, because if it didn't get through, or the deposit didn't complete the transaction, so now we have checks that we're filing that are hot checks,
Right,
for a lengthy period of time. They're locked, but the potential is still there.
So the process there should be this. Each check should be stamped on the back for deposit only, and there should be a special stamp saying that it's as electronic image. Okay, so it would be deposit only, have the account number on it, and say as electronic image. And then you should be sealing that up in an envelope and locking it up in a drawer. So every time that in the 14 days, with us at least 14 days is the standard time to keep them locked up and then shred them. Okay, so every practice, every business should have a shredder, right? Because we don't want to think you just throw it in the trash, or that we just tear it up and tear it in half, and all of a sudden no one can get this valuable information because I tore it in half, right? That's simple, but dumpster divers are out there. So, lock it up. So when you're putting one in, you should be taking one out, right? And putting it in the shredder. So that should be the process. So if you follow the safeguards, I mean, those are pretty good audit controls. And if you can show that this is what we're doing, and if something happens, then they would have had to somehow get in there, break open the drawer, and get at the checks, right? So as long as you do that, you'll be fine.
The stamp on the back is not going to...
It's not dated, so, right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're okay.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Our next question's over here.
At what point does the bank's responsibility stop? I'm in a construction company. We keep everything locked up, shredded, safe, and but at what point, I'm the only signature on our account.
Okay.
Okay, so if somebody was able to get a hold of our account numbers, I don't see how that would be able to give them the ability to get into my account, one. And secondly, at what point does the bank's responsibility end at checking the signature on the check? If
So-
somebody did get a hold of one
Right.
of my checks and did write a check for 20 grand, then at what point does the bank's responsibility to stop payment on that check because it's fraudulent signature on it?
Right. So I can't speak. The problem is this. I can't speak for every bank. Okay. What should be in measures for each bank is this. At a certain dollar level, depending on the bank, there should be a point where the check kicks out, where they check the signature to verify what signature on file. The problem is this in a lot of cases. Your signature changes over time, or in some cases, you don't have a signature on file. All right? But under that dollar amount, which could be $10,000, typically around $10,000 or more, okay? Under that dollar amount, if something's written, say that they write multiple checks for $2,000, $3,000. That's not going to get caught. All right? That's why it's important. And the problem is the number of checks that are going through and being processed. There's no way any bank can verify every signature on every check. It's impossible. It's impossible. That's why it's best to reconcile your account as soon as possible. Don't wait a month or two out and then look back and say, well, let's make sure everything went through properly. Okay? So check with your local bank, who you deal with, see what their policies are, and then make sure they align with what you believe is fair.
Our next question's right over here.
Hey, Jeff, good presentation. Well
Thanks.
done.
Thanks.
You've talked a lot about stealing money from the practice, but do you find that employees are taking patient health records and monetizing that by selling it, out on some market somewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. That goes back to a related topic going into more identity theft, right? So, which is one of the topics I'll be covering up on August 23rd. But identity theft in Florida is number one, just so you guys know. Florida's number one in identity theft. So, woo, number one, yeah. So yeah, that's more pertinent to being in Florida too. So yeah, that is a concern with health electronic health records, that the files are more electronicized. There is information that's in there. What's supposed to happen, and that's possible. The problem is that's always possible. Where there's personal information, it's always possible that it's going to be stolen, whether internally or externally. The things that you want to have as a safeguard in a practice is you want to make sure that your practice management software can recognize who's viewing the files when, so that if something happens to a patient's record, you can go back and say, okay, who has historically reviewed this chart, and if something's out of the ordinary, then you can say, why is this person at 6 o'clock at night, who has no business with this patient, looking at their chart? All right. So the problem is in the dental space, and I can't label and say everybody, but many of the practice management softwares that are out there for dentists do not do that. And unfortunately, that's not compliant. And that's a compliant measure. So,
Our next question's Linda.
Yes, I'm Linda Johnston from USA Payroll. And one of my questions with respect to payroll, what have you found to be the largest challenges for the bank with respect to payroll?
oh, security measures. Well, as we touched on, I think check writing is number one, that they write checks for payroll. The hesitation on practice is, well, we don't want to just push the employees and make them do it and force them to do it because they're worried about bad blood, right? That it's going to make somebody who's used to getting the check wants to feel it, taste it, touch it, right? But they don't realize is that, again, 85%, right? So that's how at risk that they are. And that number is growing because, again, fraudsters are looking for the easy way to steal money, not to go into, the local gas station or, and hold a gun. That, as I talk to IRS agents more so, who speak with me on identity theft, that they say that they're going from, holding up people to stealing checks, stealing people's mail, and payroll checks is an easy one. Especially if to say if they do go into a party store that cashes checks, and guess what? They'll take all those checks. Okay, so the biggest payroll risk is those practices or businesses in general. It doesn't have to be a practice that write checks. That is, and that's why we say if you're not going to have everybody do it electronically, you better have a separate account where weekly you transfer enough money in to cover, payroll. That way, if somebody's going to hit your account, there's not much there for them to hit. Okay.
Last question for the hot seat, Louis.
Great presentation, Jeff. Are there numbers as far as if a billing company or a revenue cycle management company does the billing? Does that equal less fraud, or is it better to do the billing in-house?
Well, the fact is this: there's people. If there's people touching it, there's always a chance for fraud happening, internal or external fraud. Right? So the problem is goes back to paper versus electronic. It's not as much as to who's handling it. It goes back to say what's the instrument. Okay? So the problem is paper and what can be changed and intercepted. So the resolution is mainly turning it into an electronic item rather than a paper item that can be.
There's virtual credit card, which are basically a credit card number that the insurance company sends instead of an actual. It's still paper, but it's still electronic. Are you seeing more of those now?
That is growing more so, but I think as that grows, it'll become more apparent to say how maybe embezzlement or fraud is happening in that space. So because it hasn't had a history to show where the concern might be. I think it's kind of early to say how that's going to be utilized by fraudsters. Okay.
Well, let's give a big thank you to Jeff Holt.
All right, thank you.
Wonderful presentation.